I laugh to discharge stress. So it can be awkward, but I'm laughing because last week was so crazy. Like, I recorded that lecture, I could not get it to upload. And then yesterday I went in and I was looking at Canvas and I noticed that it finally uploaded. So I'm actually going to be sharing it. It's a different type of recording and I'm never doing it again. But we have to learn, right? So I am at home today, so you might hear my dogs in the background, hopefully not, but just a heads up. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about what's going on this week. We're going to kind of go through our little lecture, and I've shared my whole screen, so you might see some things pop up. We'll just go with what we see, okay? We'll just stay focused on the screen because I'm going to be honest, I couldn't figure out how to stop messages from popping up. So, okay, so here we are. Let's look at what is expected of this week, and then we'll kind of go with our lecture. So this week you're reading chapter 2, and this is the PowerPoint that we're going to be going over. It's just a standard reading quiz. This one is multiple choice, and you have 2 attempts. So just be mindful of that. Like, if you thought you knew the answer, but you didn't know the answer, you can go back and you can take the quiz again. There's only 2 attempts though, and it'll keep your highest score. So just FYI. Okay. Also this week, we're starting our genogram project, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I mean, when I've taught interpersonal communication class, we have a unit where we talk about family communication. And, okay. So, all right. So, sorry. We have a unit where we talk about family communication. I always have people just draw a basic genogram, nothing like what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going in depth. And it's always insightful. Everyone always comes away like, whoa, okay, that's really interesting. So I hope you find that, oh boy, okay. All right. Sorry. Speaking of family communication, I guess if you want to know the tea of what's going on in my family, you can go back and slow down and pause those and read the drama. Okay. What we are going to be doing now is, finish this module. Okay, so you're going to watch and reflect on theory and family. So the big question this week is like, does theory help family communication? Like, does knowing things like these theories actually make a difference, or is it just kind of like, okay, that's great, but it doesn't like apply practically? And so that's what we're looking at today. Of course, we're making a genogram. These are videos. I'll just click on this one. These are videos that explain how to do a genogram. And also in your textbook, at the end of chapter 2, they talk about how to do a genogram and they give basic instructions. The purpose of this is for the visual people out there. I'm one of them, to kind of go through and teach you how to do a genogram as well. So you can go this route. You can read the chapter, probably do both. So yeah, I mean, hopefully this helps, I guess is what I'm hoping to say, is that I hope this helps like both of them together so you know how to do this genogram. Because remember, you're putting together your genogram this week. Next week, you're going to be writing a paper about it. And then the week after that, you're going to be doing a video where you're going to be presenting your genogram and the patterns that you have learned. Okay, so I'm going to just pause the recording really quickly because my dog is being a baby. Let's be honest. All right, so, okay. And then, of course, you are going to respond to your peers. Now, the one thing I do want to say about the genogram is that you are, I need to tell my husband that I am actually recording a lecture. Okay. I don't mind because I think it's important for everyone to see, like, family communication is real. It will affect you for the rest of your life. It's already affected you, as you're going to learn. And Yeah, it can be some of the biggest problems and some of the simplest, easiest things that need clarified. And interestingly, it all comes down to communication. So I'm just sending a quick text. So I don't mind the, okay, I don't mind you guys seeing, but I am going to take a second. So fast forward through this part. Okay. So, yes. Okay. The other thing, this is so unprofessional, you guys. I can't believe I did that. Okay. Texted. I opened our door for my dogs. This is probably what it's like when you actually listen, right? You listen on 2x speed. You're probably doing something else. And I want you to know, I just accept that reality. And you can know that I also have a life and I'm very human. And so, yes. Okay. So here we are together. I'm regrouping in my brain. Now we're going to focus on this very last one that says, make a genogram, right? So you're going to learn how to make it by watching these videos, and then you're going to make a genogram. If you have questions about this, you can email me, you can message me in Canvas, you can chat about it in Teams. That's why we have Teams available to you. Post a question, your peers might have an answer. I'll try to be watching everything as closely as I can, so I can make sure I can answer, and if I need to do a little video to do an explanation, I will. So we'll just kind of play it by ear, kind of see how it goes. This is not something I would recommend you wait till last minute, because if questions do come up, which they almost always do, they're just like, maybe some of your peers will also be doing it at the same time you are at 11 p.m. on Sunday night, but I won't be able to help. So, I mean, if you're willing to take that risk, it's, obviously it's up to you. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is not all of us come from a nuclear family or a family situation that we even can address with any type of peace. Like, it can be very, very triggering. If you fit into that category, that is okay. What you're going to do is you're going to just find a fictional family. An example might be the Snickets in A Series of Unfortunate Events. They have a great family tree, right? That would be a fun one. You could do Harry Potter. You could do, yeah, because that whole story is about a family. Man, I'm thinking of other kind of, I don't know if you like ACOTAR, if you know, you know. There's a family in that, like, I just don't know what you read, or if you read, or what movies you watch. So if there's a television series, like maybe you love Modern Family and you think it's hilarious, like you could use that. You could use them, but the thing is that you need to be able to create 3 tiers. Okay, so like your generation. So if it's you would create it would be yourself. And if it's a fictional family, it would be the fictional person you want to start with. So let's say we start with Harry Potter. Okay, so either you can start with yourself, or you can start with Harry Potter, or the cute little kids in the Series of Unfortunate Events. You just pick one of them, and they would be your like landing point. And then you need 3, and then you need 2 generations at least back from that. The goal here is to try to discover the patterns of family communication. And that's what your report will be on next week, is what are the patterns? What do you see? Are there positive patterns? Are there negative patterns? Are there both? Most of us have mixed, like we have some that are positive and some that are negative. So yeah. So ask me questions. They'll probably come up, but that you're going to need to figure out those patterns and be watching for them. This is so funny. And be watching for them. Yes. Okay? Because you're going to write about them. And then from your report, you're going to do your video about them. And the videos everyone is going to see. So you're going to make your video You're going to post it in a discussion, and then you're going to go watch each other's videos and kind of learn from one another. Okay? Because I do want people to see like how different our families are. Every family has its own culture. Every family is so unique, and communication and how we communicate make up a big, big, big part of that. All right. Okay. So that's what like the module looks like this week. All right, let's go to this PowerPoint. Okay, so this week we're going to be talking about just kind of some frameworks and theories to kind of lay the groundwork for all the stuff that comes after this. It's, you know, pretty standard upper division format. Okay, so I am just going to download this really quickly. This is what it would be like if you were in my classroom. Would I text? I might, if it's that awkward. So I might do it. I will tell you while this is loading, something really interesting my husband and I did not know. And that is our family of origins have completely opposite communication patterns. And we've been married now about 20, I want to say 23, 22 years. And you'd think after 2 decades, we would be able to figure it out. No, it's still just as crazy as always. It's always been. Okay, so yes. So my genogram is really interesting. I might make a video on Thursday where I create a genogram so you guys can kind of see what my genogram looks like, because I could do, and I don't know if any of you are in this situation. I don't think so from your introductions. I guess there's a few of you. I don't know if your kids are old enough though yet, where you could be the middle generation. But again, if we can, the further back we can go, the better, because then we can see these patterns. Like something really, really interesting that I just learned in the last year. I'm 47. Okay. So in the last year, I learned that there is this negative approach that the women in my families have toward men. And it has been passed down, we figured out, for about 5-6 generations of these just hyper feminist, man-hating women. And I did not even realize it. Like, it did not click that it was like a generational communication pattern that I had learned. So when we're talking about like why genograms are so valuable, hopefully that's a reflection of one thing that would be a reflection of what matters. And I say that because now that I know that, of course, that communication has affected the way I communicate with my husband. And so knowing this allows me to adjust, to change, to talk to my own daughter and be like, hey, by the way, I've probably taught you some of these patterns. Like my own sons are more feminist. And while that's cool for the women that they date, they're not always nice to the men in their lives. And so this is a big deal, right? This is a communication pattern that I've passed on, and a perspective that I've passed on that needs to change, because we want to treat everyone the same, like with love and compassion, not like favor someone because of, it's like racism, right? It's like genderism. I don't know. Like, so that's why these are so, so important. Okay, so we're going to be talking about theoretical frameworks. You can see, like, this is a very research heavy chapter. There's so much here that we could honestly be doing. We could be doing full lectures on each one of these PowerPoints. So I will do my absolute best to try to get through all of this. I mean, we're going to get through all of it. I might need to do 2 because there is just so much here, but I think you're going to find it interesting. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so first of all, we need to define theory. And my suspicion is by this point in your education, you have a pretty good sense of what theory is and what it isn't, and that's a really important boundary to have, the boundary of what it is and what it isn't. Sometimes we like to think that, I want to say like axioms are theories, and they're usually not, right? That's one thing it isn't, but one thing it um, is it kind of teaches us a little bit about the communication theory that we need to know about. So I'm just trying to put this up here so that I am my face isn't in the way. Okay, maybe keep it down there. Okay, so here are the elements of a theory, and this particular book has specific definitions. They're pretty consistent with research definitions. So a theory is going to make statements about the relevant context or contexts, plural. So in the case of family communication, we might have multiple contexts. Those contexts could be in a marriage, with children, with parents, with in-laws. Okay, all of those are different contexts. So the statements that a theory makes will be about those relevant contexts. There will always be a set of general propositions. I would add to that, there's also going to be a set of assumptions. If we see the world one way, then that means so if I see the world as a hyper-independent woman, as an individualist, then I am going to communicate in X, Y, and Z ways. Those are the propositions. Okay. And then we're going to make statements that connect those propositions. Okay, so if I communicate in X, Y, and Z, then that means in the context of my marriage, I'm going to communicate this way. In the context of my children, I'm going to communicate another way. So all of those contexts kind of come into play when, I'm sorry, not those contexts, those statements of the propositions come into play depending on the context. So it all kind of circles together. And then a theory must be able, it must have the capacity to be tested or applied. So what does that mean? In the case of quantitative research, it needs to be able to be tested and replicated. In the case of qualitative research, it needs to be able to be applied. So what I learn from the stories of other people, can I apply those principles to my own life? Okay, so that's what we're looking at with theory, the elements of a theory. All right. Okay, so the goal of a theory is to explain, it's to understand, it's to predict, and in some cases to influence social change. So if we can see that, like, if I'm a hyper independent woman and I'm communicating one way with my husband and another way with my children, it might teach my children independence and self-reliance and self-sufficiency, but it might actually hurt my husband and create division. Okay, so in that case, it's a toxic pattern, and that means it needs to change. So you can see we're like, this is what we're talking about with family communication when we talk about influencing social change. And then another thing that you need to be mindful of is we're going to be using models. You've seen communication models in the past. They will continue to exist, but your genogram that you're building is actually a model of the family communication that you're dealing with. Okay, so also we need to talk about typologies. These are the list of categories or types that are subsets of the larger construct. So these are pretty important. Yes, they're like the qualities, it says the dimensions, the characteristics. So if you notice, I've been using the words hyper-independent. That would be a typology. As a hyper-independent woman communicating, so again, you see, okay, that adjective is not just an adjective, it's also a typology of how this woman functions in the world. All right. So hopefully this is clarifying some of these vocabulary words. All right, so theories, we use them in family communication as tools. Okay, so we are parallel to another discipline, and that discipline is marriage and family therapy. Marriage and family therapy is also about communication. And so the purpose of studying that is to be able to provide tools, both for us as communication professionals and for others to be able to use to help people improve their family life, to help people improve their communication. So we're going to do that in many ways. We might do it through metaphors. Systems theory is actually a huge metaphor. It's a huge analogy of what a family looks like, and we'll talk about that later in this lecture. They're really important. They can be super, super helpful to help us make sense of like, oh, that's why grandpa behaved that way, or that's why my stepmom was X, Y, or Z, or that's why my foster parent had that pattern. And so, and that's why they behave like they did. Like it's a way for us to just like make sense of how the family works. Okay, the other thing is theories. So just kind of add this second one. Theories may help make sense of family life, but they can also prevent us from seeing issues critical to family experience. And this is where transparency is critical. So this is a statement as researchers where we're saying, you know what, like our engagement is super, super important, but we also need to acknowledge that it might be problematic as well. So we want to make sure that we're taking both of these things into account as we move through this chapter. Okay, theories offer us a way to make sense of raw data to help us research, which could and should be considered and not ignored, but also then we need to acknowledge, like, is it also inhibiting? Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. Actually, let me go back and give an example of where it can be inhibiting. So I have a history of mental illness in my family, primarily with depression, like major depressive disorder is the actual diagnosis. And with major depressive disorder, the label itself can be really helpful in like a clinical situation. But if I go into a family system and it's like this person has major depressive disorder, then people start doing weird things with the person, right? There's all these limitations that they feel like the person has. So maybe let's say a researcher comes in, they're checking mental health and communication, they're talking to someone and they are like, oh yeah, we'll just use the terminology from the DSM, like major depressive disorder, in our research. And what we find out is actually, you know, maybe somebody doesn't have major depressive disorder, maybe they're just sad. And so when they communicate, it sounds like major depressive disorder, but it's not. That's where we're having problems, right? That's where we can actually have challenges in seeing like critical family issues. Like maybe this person is sad because we need to dig deeper. Maybe there's abuse going on in the home nobody knows about and no one talks about, but we can see from these symptomologies that there's something there. But if I just label it major depressive disorder, then the victim just gets labeled and we actually aren't breaking down to see these other critical issues that might be going on in the family experience. Okay, so hopefully that helps make sense of this kind of second statement. Okay, we're going to transition now, like 180 degrees. Okay, and now we're going to talk about research approaches. So we want to understand family. We actually want to build theories around family communication with the hopes that it will help families. And that's the first section of this. Now the second section of this is how do we go about building those theories? How do we go about researching those theories? So in the text, they offer like 3 approaches. I actually think that there are more. There are more than this. Like my PhD is not, it's in communication. I actually do organizational communication. You find like family communication, organizational communication are very, very similar. So I come from a different different tradition than what is here. But what is here, they're super important traditions. And I'm actually excited I'm going to start dipping my little fingers, get my little fingers into some of these approaches that I haven't done before. So this is how we research. Let's say I want to learn about your families in this class. These are like the different research approaches I could take. Okay. Now, often research approaches just mean they are the set of assumptions that we're going to make about how the researchers see the world and about how the world works. Okay, so that's super critical to understand. All right, so an approach is a set of assumptions that help us understand how the researchers research and how the world works. So if I'm building out a theory, that means there are a certain set of assumptions that need to be understood for the theory to be applied. Okay, so let's look at these. Okay, so there's the post-positivistic approach, which assumes objectives and objective reality that will be imperfectly known through probability. So what this means is we can do quantitative research on this, but we're never going to be able to get it exactly right because people are individuals, but there is an objective reality and we can know it, but we can't perfectly know it because we can't test everyone in the whole wide world. So we're just going to say it's probably going to work out this way, or in like law terms, that would be like allegedly they did this thing. Like maybe it's likely that this will happen under these certain circumstances, but we can't know for sure, because we can't test everyone in the whole world in this scenario. Okay, so that's the post-positivistic approach. The assumption in that approach is that there is an objective reality. So that's the assumption about how the world works, and that we can know it, okay, imperfectly. We can know it, but it'll be imperfect. All right, so that's another really important part of this. Sorry, I got a space heater, and it's a bit chilly. Okay. All right, so the next one is the interpretive approach. This is my particular area. I'm a qualitative researcher, and I tend to lean toward the interpretive approach. And it says this, I'll read the statement, then I'll point out the assumptions. It views truths as subjective and co-created by the participants. Now, the reason why let me explain the assumptions. There are truths. They are subjective to the reality and context around them. And that truth comes into fruition because of interactions that we have through other people. Okay, so here's an example of this. I've always loved American literature. I don't know why, I just have. It's just one of my things. Like my favorite book of all time is The Scarlet Letter. I don't know if you guys had to read that in school. I don't even know if it's allowed anymore. It's probably like on a banned book list somewhere. I don't even know. But in The Scarlet Letter, to make sense of the community, you have to read kind of each word and see how the dialogue builds on each other to make meaning out of what happens to Hester Prynne at the very beginning of the book. And in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like that's how we make sense of meaning in our lives, particularly with family life. Like, I do believe that there is a big T truth, but I think sometimes what it makes sense for me is not going to be what makes sense for you. Sometimes my personal trauma is going to affect the way I function in the world in ways that are almost unimaginable. But if you have that exact same trauma, you might actually be more resilient. And so it might function how you interact with the world in a way that's different than the way I've interacted with the world. And that's why I think these small T truths are subjective, because I do think that we have so much more at play than we could even imagine. And then I 1000% subscribe to this idea that we co-create our experience and the way we see the world with other people. And in the case of this class, those other people are our family. Okay, so those are the participants, right? The families in the world in which we are working. Okay, there's one other approach, and it's the critical approach. I'm not sure if this is recording my face or not, so I'm going to bring this up here. Okay, so this critical approach posits that theories exist to bring values to the surface where they can be challenged or changed. Okay, so often with critical approach, what we're doing is we're trying to say, hey, something is not okay here. And we need to challenge the world in which we live so that we can change our society so it's more equitable. That's what critical approach is. Critical approach can have a very positive frame and it can have a very negative frame, just depending on your personal values and belief systems. So I just want to acknowledge that. Some of it just depends on how much life experience you've had. But if you were to talk about like critical approach with your parents, some of them would probably respond very negatively. Some of them would probably respond positively. Some of them may not know what you're talking about. But critical approach is a very hotly contested way of seeing the world. Um, another name for this is like a Marxist approach. So yeah, just so you know. Okay, so these are the different approaches and the different ways in which we can see the world. They're the assumptions, they're the foundations on which we build theory. Okay, so theoretical assumptions underlying the text. So the authors of this text, which I super appreciate, are basically saying, hey, you know what? You need to understand that as authors, we have written this text assuming that the world functions in a certain way. And since you're going to be reading this, you need to know how we see the world. So that's basically what they're saying, is this is how we see the world. Okay, so basically what they're saying is communication is central to the family. Like almost you can't have a family without communication. Okay, so communication constructs family identity and relationships and culture, hands down. Okay, I agree with this 100%. Like I don't know that there's any more that I could say. I agree with this 100%. What we find also in like in organizational literature is that an organization cannot exist without communication. Communication makes the organization, and we're saying the same thing. Communication makes the family, okay? Obviously, we could argue a post-positivist approach and say, well, maybe biology makes the family. That's true, but what about people who have chosen families, who needed chosen families? Then that tenet doesn't hold true. And so that's why we would kind of lean more toward this communication constructs, also as family communication class. So, okay, the process approach. What we believe then as we approach this is that family life changes with the passage of time. I also want to add to that, and as you see me lecturing throughout the semester, you'll find that I also believe that family life doesn't just change, but that there are stages of development in family life, just like there are in individuals' lives. So I don't know, lots of your parents might be coming to an empty nester stage, or they are in an empty nester stage. And what that means is they've had children, they've reared them, their children are moving into adulthood, and now it's like the two of them. So obviously this is a nuclear family approach, but then they have to figure out what to do with each other. That is a different stage than some of you are in, where you're building your family and you have little people running around there, super cute. And it's just different. How you communicate is different. What you communicate about it is different. And so that's a stage. So that's why I'm saying it's not just that family life changes, but there are also stages to family lives. Okay. for the textbook, they're arguing that families live in an external context, and then they create an internal one. So what we're saying is pop culture can look this way, but the family culture looks this way. Culture with friends can look this way, but the family culture looks this way. Like, you might swear around your friends because that's okay, because that's part of your friend culture, but you go home and you don't swear in front of your mom because she will like have your throat, right? She washed your mouth. That was so, just kidding. I don't know if she did that. But like, I see this with my kids, right? Sometimes they slip and they use all kinds of words that I did not teach them. So the two cultures look different. And so that's why we're saying there's this is an external culture, but there's also going to be an internal culture. And we need to acknowledge that families have no control over shaping the external culture, but it does exert influence over how families interact. Okay, tell you a little story. Okay, so I have a scenario where there's a dad and there's children, and the children are making choices that the dad and the mom don't appreciate, and the dad does not know how to handle, I shouldn't say doesn't know how to handle, has been handling the communication differently in their family because he's so distressed over the choices that are being made by the children, right? So he doesn't have control over this external culture, whatever it is, friends, family, I'm sorry, not family, friends, pop culture, education, whatever. No control. But the choices that his children are making are affecting the family culture over here. Okay, so that's what that means. You can probably, if you think about it in your own family life, can think of scenarios where this exact thing has happened. Okay, the final thing on this slide is that the family is a meaning-making system. This is my favorite part, okay? We make sense of our purpose, of our world through meaning, and we do that with our other family members. We do it with our friends. We do it with the world around us. Like, we're doing it all of the time. But the family has a particularly heavy influence on this meaning-making system. So I had a child that came to me and said, I just am so, why am I so judgmental? I feel like I'm just walking around judging people all of the time. And it is because there was a religious culture that was influencing the family culture, and the family culture was basically nodding to the religious culture, but the religious culture, for some reason, one of the underlying assumptions was it's okay to judge all the people around you. It's okay to, like, because you got to judge them so you can know who can be your friends and who can't be your friends. And some of you might be in a similar situation where you understand exactly what I'm saying. Okay, they're making sense of like how to function in the world because of the influence of the family culture and the religious culture, and they're taking that out into the world, and they're like, wait, this is how I'm supposed to function in the world. But actually, as I go through the world, I find that I'm being mean, and I don't want to be mean, but I feel like in order to make sense of the world in which I'm living, I have to be mean. Do you see what I'm saying? I hope this makes sense. But I'll read this statement, and if you have any questions about this, let me know, because this making meaning, I think, well, it's obviously something I love, but it's so important. This is where we get our initial frameworks. Like, when people say, like, what's your self-talk around that? What they're saying is, what's the meaning you're assigning to that? So I ask my kids this. Like, my youngest son's super nervous about asking a girl to sweethearts. And I was like, and so I started asking him, like, what's the meaning that you're assigning to this experience? Like, and then we figured out as we kind of talked through it, like, he was worried about the expectations of the girls, even though they'd given him no expectations. He was still like assuming that they had expectations of him. So he was making meaning for them, for himself. Does that make sense? It can be so complex. And if you're an overthinker, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so important. If you have questions about that, please let me know. So a family's relational culture is the results of meanings that family members create among themselves. So, another example, my husband's family of origin. My husband's family of origin believes that their family is the most important family on the planet. And as those kids were growing up, they felt like they belonged. They were important. They were the most important family on the planet. They were different. Their family was the best and the brightest and the most connected. That worked incredibly well until their family members started marrying other people. And then the other people started bringing in different cultural aspects. And it did not align with the meaning that they had created, to the point where my mother-in-law started hanging pictures of all of her children when they were 3 years old, because that's when she had the most control over the family culture. Now, cognitively, she might not realize that's exactly what she's doing, but that's exactly what she's doing, because it doesn't fit the narrative anymore. So then what? Oh, we'll talk more about that another time. We'll talk about that when we talk about conflict. Okay. All right. So now we've talked about all this stuff. Okay, we're doing another shift, another turn. Now we're going to talk about the primary theories that exist in family communication. And this is something, again, we're parallel with marriage and family therapy here. Marriage and family therapy is based off of systems theory, which is the theory I'm going to talk about now. So we're going to understand definitions, and then we're going to be like, oh, okay. So what we're trying to do in marriage and family therapy is we're trying to repair the system. And we argue that all system problems that happen are because of a violation of these kind of definitions that we're looking at on the screen. Okay, I swear I talk with my hands so much. I'm pretty sure this is recording my face and my arms, but if it's not, you guys are missing a whole show. Okay, just kidding. All right, so we're at 41 minutes. Okay, we're just gonna keep going. So systems theory includes wholeness. Okay, so we cannot understand the whole system by just understanding one person. So actually, my family, like, I'm an open book, obviously. My family is in therapy right now, and 3 of the people in my family go and see the same therapist, because in order for him to be able to help them all, he needs to be able to understand the system and their individual parts in the system, because they're all interconnected. Have you ever, I'm trying to think of a visual example of this. Like, I'll have to think about it. Like, what's coming to my mind is like when you have a rubber band that's kind of separated onto, like, let's say there's 4 pegs, like north, south, east, west pegs, and you take a rubber band and you wrap it around the outside of those pegs. If I move the south peg, it's going to affect the east and the west peg. It's going to create more tension in the rubber band. And so this idea of understanding wholeness is that it's like, where is the rubber band being pulled? So, and where is the tension existing in the system so that we can help rectify it? In the case of family communication, what we're looking at is we're just looking at the way it works. We're not necessarily looking at repairs. We're not looking at the therapeutic side of this, but it is interesting to understand. Okay. The other thing that we need to understand is that there's interdependence, right? That's the pull of the rubber band on all 4 of the pegs, or all 4 of the people, let's say. Okay, so interdependence, this is the elements of a system that are interrelated, and the behaviors of system members co-construct the system. So my oldest son got a tattoo, and then another one, and then another one, whatever. Okay, that's his decision. It's his body. The next youngest sibling was like, whoa, those are cool. Ooh, I should get a tattoo. Okay, so the one made a decision, engaged in a behavior, and then the other one was like, oh, that's cool, I'm gonna do that. And then they got a tattoo. Okay, so they're co-constructing the system, this culture of what it looks like in our family, of to be adults, like a family of adult children with their parents. Their system is looking different because they're co-constructing a different culture. Okay, so that's an example of that. Hierarchy is just like, in systems theory, it's not necessarily like a power hierarchy, although power does come into play about with it. It's just kind of like what systems matter most. Like in a family, is it the marriage that's the most important, or is it the children that are most important and the parents subserve to the children? Is it like the the mom and the daughter and the husband and the sons are inclined to hang back whenever the mom and the daughter want to do something? So that's what we're talking about with hierarchy. It's almost like priority. So all the system have levels, and there are subsystems within the system, and all systems are embedded in other systems. They're called supersystems. So we have a family system, an immediate family. Let's say we have a solo mom, a single mom, and she has 2 kiddos, and they are also part of their extended family. And so there's the grandma and the grandpa of the mom, and the kids are interacting with that larger family system. And then in I mean, in Utah, in some cases, there's an even bigger, you know, super system. And then like that religious example that I gave you earlier, the religion would be a super system. So they're a bigger system that the family is like um, submerged in. So hopefully that gives you a sense of like, it's not quite like hierarchy, power hierarchy. It's more like where the systems work and how big and how small the systems are. Okay. Additionally, boundaries and openness. So systems theory comes from a biological metaphor. It's a super fascinating metaphor. The actual reading itself is super, super fascinating about the original reading about systems theory. So if you think about a cell in your body or in a plant, okay, a cell has the cell wall, the membrane, and that fatty membrane is open to certain things and closed to other things. So as I read this statement, think of that metaphor, because that is the implication that they're trying to draw up. Those are that's the metaphor they're trying to draw up in your mind, okay? So the permeability around the family system and the subsystem they contain, that's like what the openness and the boundaries are. So let's go back to my mother-in-law and how they had a closed family system because their family was the best and they're the best together. Um, so when people marry into the family, they're called outlaws to reflect that they are not part of the system. So then people who marry into it are then a subsystem of their own, because the family system is not totally permeable or permeable at all. Okay, so that is an example of what that looks like in family relationship. All right, calibration is when we're checking the scale. We're checking to see what's going on. We're getting feedback. Does the system need to change? In a therapeutic context, that's exactly what's going on. We're calibrating. We're trying to like readjust the system. Another metaphor that gets used with systems theory is an engine. So if you think about calibration in an engine, that's kind of what we're talking about. Or calibration with hardware and technology, that's what we're talking about. We're saying, okay, for all of this to function how I wanted to, it needs to be calibrated to a certain way. And that's what we're saying with the family. In order for it to be its healthiest, it needs to be calibrated to a certain way. Okay. And then equifinality is the ability to achieve the same goals through different means. So can I make my way in the world by going to MTech or by going to UVU? You know, like That's what that means. Like, and as a family, in the family system, do we support all of those options? Okay, family systems is huge. Obviously, it's like its own discipline. And so we just take what we can use from it, like these definitions in family communication, and then all the other stuff we kind of just let the therapeutic people have. Okay. All right. So we're at about 50 minutes. Uh, I think I'm just going to keep going. You guys can just obviously pause, listen to the, I mean, you have control over how long, it's like long form stuff. Okay, so the purpose of the system is to emphasize homeostasis, but that's also a limit. Because if you have a toxic family system and they're trying to stay consistent, it's going to screw over everyone in the system. Okay. They're also saying it's not a true representation of family life because family life has stages, right? Like we've talked about, it changes. And so emphasizing homeostasis in a family system doesn't work. In an organizational system, it works a little bit better. Like in a workplace, it works a little bit better. But in a family system, it doesn't work as well. Okay, so that's a limit. That's a problem with this theory. It also keeps us from recognizing and appreciating the random and unpredictable behaviors in families. Like, what if you just have that person who's just like, their personality is just like unregulated and spontaneous? Like, they're like the fun, crazy aunt or uncle, and they show up at your house and they're like, let's go to Disneyland. I don't know if that happens, but like that kind of unpredictability and that randomness, like, there's no way to account for that. And so then in systems theory, it would not work. It just wouldn't work. Okay. Like if you think about it in terms of the body system, which is where systems theory emerged from, remember the biological sciences, when we have random and unpredictable behavior in our bodies, it means we're sick. So you can see where this doesn't work with a family system. Okay. Its emphasis on the whole excludes the examination of the individual. Sometimes we have individuals who legit struggle and the family system was awesome, right? So in marriage and family therapy with systems theory, the assumption is, well, like if someone's struggling, it's because of the system itself. Well, maybe the person for real just has, like in my case, like I already talked about the major depressive disorder, maybe the person for real just has major depressive disorder. And that's the end. Okay. It doesn't have anything to do with the system. All right. So that's another weakness with this theory. They're not sensitive to issues of diversity. Like there's no way for us to account for the fact that different families from different cultures look differently and they're going to function differently, and what matters to them is going to be different. It just doesn't account for that. And the other challenge is that it operates from the post-positivist intellectual tradition, which means that there's a universal truth and all is supposed to look the same. And when it doesn't, then that means that the system is broken. And in families, that's just not true. It's just not true. Like we talked about, oh, can I tell you, Tyler? I'm going to tell you a terrible story. So I'm trying to think of ways. Okay, so I have a neighbor. This is so like awesome. I have a neighbor who did work. It was past tense. It was actually decades ago. Worked for an organization, and during the time, there was a lot of anti-gay marriage sentiments. So this is the 80s and 90s, and so she was working for a nonprofit organization, and one of the people in the leadership came to her and said, "Hey, we need to find research that says that individuals of, say, the same sex who are married prove to be not very good parents." And they were like, no. And all the research says they're incredible parents. They're just as incredible as heterosexual couples, like incredible parents. And so this idea of a universal truth and that only people who look a certain way can be excellent parents, or marriages that are a certain way can be excellent parents, is is actually in the sciences proven to be false. So that's where the struggle, that's a struggle and an actual experience. I like my jaw like hit the floor when she told me that. She's retired now, like she's been retired for over a decade, and her experiences are just super fascinating. The woman was like an attorney turned behavioral researcher. She has like one of the brightest minds. She's like in her 70s and she can still run circles around me. Man, man, super cool. Anyway, okay. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to come back and record the rest of this. So there will be 2 parts to this. But hopefully this has been helpful and interesting and you're learning. Okay, so I will see you guys in the next little lecture. This other one will probably only be maybe a fourth of the length of this one. So just so you're aware. All right, have a good one.